14,074. NVIDIA. Jensen Huang's hiring of Korean researchers 1-2. Question Master. Recently, NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang personally visited Korea, highly praised our excellent infrastructure, and began recruiting Korean researchers. While it is encouraging that a top global company recognizes our technological prowess, I also worry that our brilliant minds and industrial ecosystem might inadvertently become subordinate to or fall under the control of massive foreign platforms. I ask for your righteous teachings on how we should view this situation.
We, the Korean people, were once treated with contempt. We were a despised people, but now that we have fully grown and the time for our fortune to flourish has arrived, the excellence of the Korean people is becoming evident. Some exceptionally brilliant individuals are bursting forth onto the scene, but is it only some who are excellent? Everyone in South Korea is excellent. Because each person has grown by developing their own unique talents, everyone is outstanding. However, we are failing to utilize these brilliant people properly. Who is failing? The leaders of South Korea are not utilizing them well. If they were managing them properly, what would happen? We would shine a light from here to help humanity. Then who am I referring to when I say leaders? I am talking about the chairman of South Korea's large conglomerates and mid-sized enterprises. These individuals are the true leaders. Then are the ministers not leaders? No, they are not. Is the president not a leader? No, they are not. We are mistaken about who the leaders are. Because our society has been unable to clearly define who the social leaders are, people assume that if someone is the president, they must be a leader. The whole world is like that. They think the president is the leader, but they aren't. The president is someone who works. To put it bluntly, they are a servant of the people. They were placed in that position to work. What should a worker do? They must receive a salary. They were sent to that position to carry out important tasks while being paid a salary, but they don't know what their actual job is, so even though it is important, they don't do it. Not a single person does it. In the past, our predecessors, like George Washington and many others when America was first rising, were great people for their time. They led the world with the philosophy of that era. However, people today sit in positions as global leaders, yet not a single true leader exists among them. The president is not a leader, not right now. They were sent to that position to be nurtured into a leader, but they fail to grow into one. Why? Because they don't know how. They haven't studied how to be a leader. When someone is sent to the presidency, let me talk a little bit about the South Korean president. Don't say we asked about NVIDIA. Why are you going off on this tangent? It is all interconnected and means the same thing. What the president of a South Korea of this current scale must do is study presidential studies while holding the office. It is not a position to wield power or just play the president. It is a place to complete one's final grand study. South Korea itself is a massive research institute. Then what kind of person should the current president be? It is a position where one must meet all the leaders of the world. Since South Korea has achieved this level of national prestige and our people have worked hard to grow this much, what kind of person should we elect as the South Korean president? We must elect someone capable of meeting all the world's leaders. There aren't many such people. Then, why meet all the global leaders? To study the world. It is to educate them about the world, to make them understand the world. Out of all South Korean citizens combined, who holds the position with the power to meet all the world's leaders? It is the president. South Korea is a country with enough power and national prestige to allow its president to meet any global leader. So, what should the president do upon meeting all these world leaders? They must meet them, be humble, and listen intently to what they have to say. That is all they need to do. What we call learning means listening to the words of others a lot. Learning does not mean doing all the talking yourself. You must listen carefully to the other person. Then, what should you listen to? You must listen to the difficulties of that country. Leave the good things aside. Since they are doing fine on their own, you must constantly listen to what challenges that country is facing. As you keep listening to this, you realize, this is how humanity is living. You must constantly hear these things from the leaders who possess the highest level information. The South Korean president only needs to do that. Go out internationally and be humble. We still do not truly know the international stage yet. What you think you know is only what you've learned from books and knowledge. If you go to the actual field with an attitude of listening well, your perspective will expand after visiting a few places. After visiting a few more, it will expand even further, and eventually, a breakthrough of absolute understanding will burst forth. You must accumulate this by meeting global leaders, listening to things you've never heard before, and absorbing it all. Through this, the president studies the world. They must listen to all the world's problems, difficulties, and current environmental challenges. If they listen with absolute clarity, what happens? All of this becomes data, and as it gathers comprehensively to a certain point, a breakthrough of understanding bursts forth. That is when wisdom emerges. When wisdom comes forth, you can bring out the answers, the solutions for those countries. Then, after serving a 5-year presidential term, while they might offer some help during the term as wisdom emerges along the way, once they complete these 5 years of presidential studies, they must establish a foundation. Upon finishing presidential studies, one opens a foundation. Through that foundation, they must now begin to help the world. Who is this person? It means producing a true global politician. A person who lives for the sake of the world emerges, a representative of our people. The time has come to bring forth global politicians. Since when? This was supposed to begin in 2013, starting with President Park Geun-hye. The latter heaven era, Hucheon era, has begun, a time when we must start producing global politicians, leaders of humanity, and people who know how to live for the world. This is what a South Korean president is supposed to do. The president does not rule South Korea. The owners of South Korea are the South Korean people. The president is not the owner. They were elevated to that position to study anthropology for the sake of humanity. To ensure they travel comfortably, a private jet was provided, a staff of secretaries accompanies them, and when asked who wants to join this time, business leaders flock to go along. They can lead everyone. If they were given that much power and still fail to study international affairs, aren't they fools? They simply haven't received teachings on these matters. Why? Because they haven't met a true master. Now, global politician number one needs to emerge, but they are not appearing. There is still no sign of such a figure. That is why President Yoon Suk-yeol was that kind of person. I am not taking his side. Think about it carefully. Count on your fingers how many people we have who, upon becoming president, are capable of meeting international leaders. Initially, number one was President Park Geun-hye. She could meet about 70 to 80% of the world. The environment was set up so that she could meet any leader of humanity she wanted to. However, because she didn't understand the principle of meeting them, after going to a few places, everything lost momentum. Next came President Moon Jae-in. Is he someone who could meet all the world leaders? Audience know it becomes clear naturally. Laughter. Our people know everything. When we trace it back and look closely, we just know. One look is all it takes to see the whole picture. We know everything. He was not that person, so he just bided his time. Then when Yoon Suk-yeol became president, was he a president whom global leaders wanted to meet? Or was he a president at whom everyone shook their heads? Audience, whom they wanted to meet? This is what I am talking about. I am not taking President Yoon's side. He was a person who possessed the qualifications to study. Why? Because he was a person whom all the world's leaders wanted to meet. That is what I am referring to. By the law of 3 and 7, 30% and 70%, he should have spent 30% of his effort managing internal affairs and 70% meeting international leaders, absorbing that entire environment. The country runs fine because there are ministers and a prime minister. Domestic affairs keep rolling. The president only needs to handle the 30% that requires authorization or some oversight. He should have prepared to elevate national prestige by absorbing international affairs and making friends, juniors, and seniors out of international leaders. Despite being given that qualification, he failed to do so. This is what I am addressing. Now, if I go as far as the next point, people might come to arrest me. But let's say Lee Jae-myung becomes president. Is he a president whom people around the world would eagerly want to meet? Audience, you know the answer, right? It shows. He is not. The person who should be president now must possess the kind of character that makes global leaders want to meet them the moment they step forward. That kind of person is presidential material. If we elect the wrong president, we waste several years. Now is not the time for that. It is time to bear fruit. Therefore, leaders must study properly. Let's stop here on that note. Now, who are our business leaders? Corporate chairmen are tribal chiefs. Tribal chiefs. When we establish a massive nation, we unite these tribes to raise the country. However, South Korea built its nation without existing tribes. The people just rose up. That is how the nation was raised. What makes South Korea different from the rest of the world is that after World War I and II, when South Korea was re-established, there were no tribes, no organizations, and everyone was living like beggars. As South Korea started from scratch, it nurtured everything so that organized structures could emerge. These are the corporate chairmen of South Korea. They rose from nothing, out of a vacuum. After making South Korea the poorest place in human history, these corporate chairmen, these tribal chiefs, are now showing a sample of how to rise up. While the state exists, the government provides the backing using the power of the people so that these business leaders can rise. That is the government's role. So, as business leaders rose, they ended up leading tribes of tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. They have now formed tribes. A proper nation can only exist when there are tribes. We made the tribal chiefs with our own hands, and we made those tribes ourselves. We did well. We made them directly with our own hands, the public and the government together. Having done that, as the tribal chiefs grew a bit, politicians, instead of viewing and guiding them properly, grabbed them by the neck to seek their own interests. Because of this, corporations have struggled to raise the nation properly. A major conglomerate is a nation in itself. Within this massive nation of South Korea, they have been building individual nations through these organizations. Then what happens? Will they become kings or emperors? Since they are tribal chiefs, even if they have just several tens of thousands of people, it constitutes a nation. This is how they currently comprise nations. Our employees are our citizens. Since they are the citizens of our tribe and these chairmen are the tribal chiefs, if they lead these people well and stand upright and proper? To give you the answer first, this tribe will go out into the world, operate for the sake of the world, and become kings within that world. By leading those countries, they become great figures there. Thus, international kings will emerge. We are currently failing to finish this final wrap-up. How do you become an international king? When you receive respect internationally. When you lead our corporation out into the international society, and that international society respects you, that is when you become a king and an emperor. South Korean enterprises were nurtured precisely to achieve this, but we haven't been able to finish it. Why? The foundation grew, but they failed to meet a master who could guide them. Because they couldn't open their wisdom, they couldn't view the world on a grand scale. They just lived inside this country, keeping an eye on things, aligning themselves here and there. Since they couldn't open their wisdom and couldn't venture out grandly, they ended up held by the neck by the government. In the future, the government must not hold corporations by the neck. Corporations will just slip away. Why? As they operate internationally, if corporations manage the economy well, which is why corporations hold legal entity status, they can amass wealth within that legal entity. When they possess hundreds of trillions of won, the state cannot treat them carelessly. Why? If the state says they won't invest, the corporation can just say, okay, understood, and simply not take the investment. When corporations try to utilize the nation's citizens or rely on banks and such to operate, they falter if the government steps on the brakes. However, in the future, as our large conglomerates rise one by one and their assets shoot up to hundreds of trillions of won, they will stop relying on the state's help to grow. When that happens, the government won't be able to hold them by the neck anymore.